Air Transat Airlines Flight 236 was heading from Toronto to Lisbon. It was midnight, and the aircraft was cruising at an altitude of 39,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean. Pilots faced the situation every day, and there was nothing abnormal in it. But there was something in the aircraft that was about to change the entire situation in just a few moments. Here, let me tell you that even from an altitude of 39,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, the ground is not visible far and wide. There, the captain suddenly realized that the plane's fuel was about to run out. It was a very scary situation for the two pilots, because running out of fuel over the Atlantic Ocean means only one thing, and that is death. Welcome back, once again, to Wisdom Wave. Viewers, this incident happened on August 23, 2001. Air Transat Airlines Airbus A330 was being prepared at Toronto Pearson Airport to travel from Toronto to Lisbon. It was supposed to be a 7-hour non-stop flight, and therefore 48 metric tons of fuel was put into it. And after the preparation, the boarding process was initiated. At that time, it was 9 p.m. local time. Flight 236 had a total of 293 passengers and 13 crew members, including 2 pilots on board. The flight captain, 48-year-old Robert Pish, who had 16,000 hours of flight experience. The first officer, 28-year-old Dirk de Jager. He also had 5,000 hours of experience, including 400 hours of flying the same Airbus A330 aircraft. Talking about the aircraft, it was a state-of-the-art Airbus A330 model at that time, which was only 2 years old. All in all, neither was there any lack of experience in the pilots, nor was there any fault in the aircraft. After completing all flight checks, the pilots taxied Flight 236 to the runway and, with ATC's permission, they took off. After takeoff, the pilots steered the plane across the Atlantic Ocean towards Lisbon. Within a few minutes, the aircraft reached its cruising altitude of 39,000 feet. Generally, on such long flights, pilots have relatively less active work to do because the autopilot system handles most of the tasks. Pilots mainly monitor the situation and keep the control tower updated with their location and status during such flights. For hours had passed since the takeoff of Flight 236, and everything was still proceeding normally. Most of the passengers in the cabin were asleep due to the late hour. The aircraft had reached the exact center of the Atlantic Ocean, and it was at this moment that an issue occurred on the plane. According to Canadian time, at 1 o'clock in the night, the pilot noticed an abnormal reading in engine number 2, which is the right engine of the aircraft. The engine was showing high oil pressure, indicating low oil quantity and low oil temperature. The pilots were seeing this kind of error for the first time in their careers. They immediately opened the flight manual and tried to understand more about this unusual error. Normally, as the aircraft operates, the oil temperature increases with time. However, in this case, it was indicating a low temperature, which was definitely not normal. They couldn't find any information about this error in the flight manual. The pilots contacted Air Transat's maintenance unit in Canada and informed them about this error. Unfortunately, the maintenance unit was also unaware of this error. They advised the pilot to keep monitoring the error. They will contact them again after a while. Although the faulty oil readings were showing in the right engine of the plane, but there was no problem whatsoever in the flight. The pilots relaxed, thinking that perhaps a faulty sensor was causing incorrect oil readings. But after half an hour, another advisory message was displayed in front of the captain. This message was not related to oil but related to fuel. The fuel of commercial airlines is equally distributed in their wings, and it was noticed that the 2 wings of Flight 236 do not have the same amount of fuel. The quantity of fuel in the right wing was less than that of the left. Now, this issue wouldn't normally be considered so serious, because this issue could be fixed during the flight itself. The captain opened the cross-feed valve to address this issue, from which fuel started to flow from left wing to right wing. And within minutes, the fuel quantity in both wings had become equal again. Just 10 minutes later, the captain started receiving a low fuel warning. This was the kind of issue no pilot wants to face, especially on a plane full of passengers. The pilot noticed that the fuel in the right wing had decreased again, and now, even when combining the fuel from both wings, there wasn't enough to reach Lisbon. This time the matter had become serious. There were very limited options available for diverting the plane in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Actually, they had only one option, and that was Azores Island. These islands are part of Portuguese territory in the Atlantic Ocean, where there is an airport on the island named Terceira. The captain contacted Santa Maria ATC in the first place and informed them that they were going to land at that airport due to fuel shortage. But the pilot still wasn't sure whether they would be able to reach that airport or if they might have to land in the ocean. At that time, the aircraft had approximately 7 tons of fuel left, which is around 7,000 kilograms. While it might seem like a lot, in reality, it was only around 6% of the A330's fuel capacity, and that too was diminishing rapidly. But the question is, why was the fuel getting low in the first place? Was there another faulty sensor giving incorrect readings this time? Or was there actually a fuel shortage? A decrease in fuel can only occur in one situation. There might be a fuel leak happening somewhere. To find out, the captain gave instructions to the flight crew to go and monitor the trailing edge of the wing. If there is a fuel leak, then surely there will be an indication from there. But due to the darkness, the crew could not find any such indication. Now, the condition was that 1 ton of fuel was depleting every 5 minutes. Now it is clear to the captain that the fuel is leaking from somewhere. They now had only 25 minutes worth of fuel left. During this time, it was not even possible to reach Terceira Airport. Meanwhile, the captain and first officer were continuously in contact with the maintenance unit and ATC. The maintenance unit gave instructions to the captain to descend the aircraft from 39,000 to 20,000 feet to confirm the fuel leakage. But the captain declined to do so, as they believed that even if the fuel leakage was confirmed, it wouldn't be possible to ascend the aircraft back up. At least they still have the option of gliding at 39,000 feet for now. In the next few minutes, all doubts were dispelled when a fire erupted in the right engine of the aircraft. Upon seeing this, panic spread throughout the aircraft, and the clouds of fear swept away the tranquility of passengers who had been peacefully asleep. The aircraft now had about 4.5 tons of fuel left and only one engine remaining. With just one engine, it was not possible to continue cruising, so a gradual descent in altitude began. On the other hand, emergency was declared at Terceira Airport. Fire trucks and emergency crews initiated their preparations to handle any kind of situation. The aircraft, which was still 240 kilometers away from Terceira Airport, now had only 600 kilograms of fuel remaining. In the meantime, what was feared happened, because the left engine caught fire due to running at full thrust. And now Flight 236 began gliding over the Atlantic Ocean without engines. Here, the captain's decision not to drop the aircraft to 20,000 feet proved to be absolutely correct. Due to the shutdown of both the engines, it is now dark inside the plane, because the electrical system of the plane also runs due to the engine. Fortunately, the automatic turbine of the plane came out, which generates only enough electricity from the airspeed to power the important equipment of the cockpit. Now, Terceira Airport was 120 kilometers away, and the aircraft had descended to 30,000 feet, and the captain had to cross this distance only by gliding. The darkness and pin-drop silence in the passenger cabin had created an atmosphere of fear, such silence that perhaps signaled an impending disaster. The worst-case scenario was that if the aircraft couldn't reach the airport, it would have to land in the ocean. For this reason, the crew began preparing the passengers for a potential water landing. Landing in the ocean is dangerous in every way, because even if the passengers survive the impact, they may drown in the water, and if they do not drown in the water, They may die of hypothermia due to the cold water. Now, normally it is very difficult to glide a passenger plane without engines. Everything was dependent on the plane's pitch control, which the pilot was manually controlling using the stick. The altitude of the plane was dropping at the rate of 2,000 feet per minute, which means that in the next 15 minutes the plane will either reach the airport or end up in the ocean. When the distance of the plane was 15 kilometers from Terceira Airport, its altitude was 13,000 feet. And normally, at such a distance, the altitude should be around 3,000 feet. Now, if the pilot lowers his altitude by performing a nosedive, the speed of the plane will be very fast. And in this situation, the possibility of crash landing is very high. That's why the pilot decided to perform a 360 degrees turn right there. Once the turn was completed, the distance from the airport remained the same, while the altitude had dropped to 5,000 feet. This altitude was still high, but not high enough to make another 360 degrees rotation. Therefore, the pilot aligned the plane's position with the runway and executed a series of S-turns. Due to the S-turns, the plane's distance from the runway increased, and it got more time to lower its altitude. In normal conditions, during landing, flaps are extended to create drag, and engine thrust is increased, causing the plane's nose to pitch up. But Flight 236 did not have engine thrust. That's why this landing was very different from normal landing and very dangerous. The pilot had only one chance to land the plane, either make it or break it. In the end, the plane landed with a strong jolt on the runway, and 8 out of 12 tires burst. There have been some difficulties in stopping the plane, but finally, it came to a halt while skidding. As soon as the plane stopped, a fire broke out in its landing gear, which was immediately controlled by the airport crew. Flight 236 was the first and last passenger plane in aviation history to hold the record for longest glide time without engines. When the investigation was done regarding the fuel leakage in the right engine, it was revealed that prior to takeoff in Toronto, the maintenance crew had replaced a part of the engine, but that part belonged to a different plane due to loose fitting. It caused vibration, which burst a fuel line passing nearby. After this incident, Airbus installed a new system that will allow pilots to detect fuel leakage during flight in the future. A year later, Captain Robert Pish and First Officer Dirk de Jager were honored with the Superior Airmanship Award for performing a dead-stick landing on an Airbus A330. I hope you will like and share this video of Wisdom Wave. Thank you so much.